could be owned by the microgrid owner or the hospital or any other partner.
So could be
really.
private sector partners, could be state and or
Yes,
county.
could be, yes. The idea is to socialize not the cost, but the benefits of having energy storage, battery storage associated with it.
So we're kind of inclusive when we talk about
Correct.
third parties. Okay.
Correct. So, page 25, Commission may extend the deadlines, require a plan to demonstrate that the construction of procurement of each energy storage device is cost-effective for a cost-benefit analysis. It's voided or delayed. Again, recall these provisions that you've heard twice already. Avoided or delayed transmission, distribution, or generation costs. Avoided emissions in the short term, projected emissions in the long term, measuring using the social cost of carbon. So energy storage doesn't have the same effect that a power plant does. So it doesn't have the same amount of emissions associated with a power plant. So an energy storage device is going to avoid some other fossil fuel generated emissions. So what does that mean? What is that plan going to be in your plan? So you're going to show that to the commission. You're going to show how, again, I think this was Senator Carrozza's question earlier, how does creating these energy storage devices avoid or delay upgrades to transmission, distribution, or other types of generation? So again, this is to try to make sure that if we're going to go down this path as a state, that we are actually avoiding some of the things that we're trying to avoid. Rather than having the need for additional transmission, the energy storage device will take care of some of that need, and the plan needs to show that. Page 25, a developer obviously can be completed within 18 months. That was requirement. Complies with other factors determined by the commission. A developer of a third-party owned energy storage device shall ensure that the workers are paid not less than the prevailing wage. An energy storage device constructed by an electric company shall be constructed by employees of the electric company or contractors that shall ensure that workers constructing the energy storage device are paid not less than the prevailing wage. Okay? I'm going to keep going. The battery storage shall meet with collective bargaining requirements. Sub 4, to a qualified contractor, puts in the requirements that the investor-owned electric company should do with using a qualified contractor, making sure that the prevailing wage is paid, offer health care and retirement benefits to the employees working on the project so that the third party is covering that, the contractor is covering that. Sub F, each energy storage project construction shall include a decommissioning plan. Again, we talked about it with nuclear, we talked about it earlier, with you have to have a decommissioning plan associated with this. And for energy storage particularly, sub 3 on page 27 says, the owner of an operator of energy storage device may submit a revised recycling and reuse plan that incorporates emerging and recycling and reuse opportunities. As we've seen over the last 8 to 10 years, batteries have become better, smaller, better, larger, better, different. And there have been incredible recycling opportunities associated with, for example, the car batteries in electric vehicles. So this says that as the technologies improve, they make sure that you have a revised recycling plan. Any questions?
No, keep going.
So we are now going to page 29. Okay, page 29 regards a large load customer as well. So sub C at the very bottom of page 29, except provided by federal law in subsections D and F, and until the state ceases to be a net importer of electricity, an electricity supplier or other owner of generation station may not enter into a contract for the provision of the direct supply of electricity to a commercial industrial customer in a way that bypasses direct interconnection of the load with the electric transmission and distribution systems or the distribution services of an electric company. An electricity supplier or other owner of a generation station may enter into a contract for the provision of the direct supply of electricity load to a large load customer in a way that bypasses interconnection if the generation station incrementally increases its generation output from its existing level to a level that meets 100% of the large load customer's expected load demand, or creates new generation output at a level that meets 100% of the large load customer's expected load demand, and still has to go through the CPCN process and any other siting and standard approvals. This says that you cannot have a behind-the-meter connection with a large load customer under the law, except if that generator facility, so let's use Calvert Cliffs as an example, if Calvert Cliffs incrementally increases its generation output from the level it is today to a level that meets 100% of that large load's need, then it may bypass and connect internally. Or if that Calvert Cliffs creates new generation output that meets the entire need, 100% of that large load customer's need, then it may connect from behind the meter. Otherwise, it is prohibited from doing so. Page 31.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan.
I was waiting for you, Devin. On page 30, you stopped at lines right after incrementally on lines 13 through 15. Could you please explain on line 18, obtains if necessary, the CPCN, the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity? What is this if necessary?
So there could be a situation where the generation that is being built would not need to comply with the CPCN if the megawatt level is low enough that it wouldn't need a CPCN. So this just says if it's not required under the law because of the amount of energy that it's producing or using to get a CPCN, then it doesn't have to.
It doesn't now under this, if we.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. So since the Vice Chair pointed out, I just want to make one other point. Sub E, the Commission may apply to a large load customer in any generation station supplying electricity to the large load customer any direct or indirect costs and fees that are normally applied to retail electric customers in the service territory in which the large load customer or the generation station is located, if those direct and indirect costs and fees are attributable to the large load customer and any generation station supplying electricity to the large load customer. So you can't bypass fees as associated with any direct or indirect costs that would have been normally applied to retail electric customers are applied to the large load customer. So they'll retail the same cost associated with the retail electric customers would be applying to this partnership, if you will, between the large load customer and the generation facility. That's if you get through all of the hoops that the Public Service Commission puts up, then you're still going to be subject to the direct and indirect costs. Okay, here's a big one. So it's page 31, talks about what I think you all have discussed in the hearing, and this is, I'm not going to use that word, but enhancing the procurement of energy in the state. And so what this section begins on page 31, defines what dispatchable energy generation is. And in this subsection, dispatchable is, and I left my list on the table, but effective load carrying capacity of at least 65% and a lower greenhouse gas emissions profile than coal or oil energy generating stations. And effective load carrying capacity means the expected capacity contribution of an energy resource during PJM's interconnection operating hours when the demand is high and the resource output is low. So think of your peak summer days when there is a high demand and the load is sometimes constrained. So that's what this section applies to. And so if you go to page 32, line 19, an application for a proposed project under this subtitle is subject to a community benefit agreement. So again, just like we did with nuclear, we did with energy storage there, in this section, it requires a community benefit agreement. And this talks about what is required in that community benefit agreement. Increased opportunities for local businesses. We caught, Madam Vice Chair, small minority women-owned and veteran-owned businesses in this one. Timely, safe, and efficient completion of the project by skilled workers, subject to the terms and conditions of the employment construction site, guaranteeing against strikes, lockouts, and similar disruptions, ensures that all work on the project fully conforms to state and federal laws, including training, creates mutual binding procedures for resolving labor disputes arising during the term of the generation project, sets forth all the other mechanisms for labor management cooperation. So here in law, we're saying, here are as part of this community benefit agreement, make sure that you're taking care of the workers that are associated with the construction of this project. Sub 3, promote safe completion of the project that ensures that 80% of the craft workers have completed occupational OSHA administration courses, career training opportunities. This is, again, developing the workforce associated with building this dispatchable generation in Maryland, including local hiring, locally sustainable and domestic contract, construction materials and components, requiring the use of skilled local labor. On page 34 now. Authorizing the Department of Labor and the Commission to review and enforce the storage developer or energy developer's compliance with any of these community benefits agreements. So similarly to storage, make sure that Department of Labor has got an eye on whether or not the community benefit agreement is being met. And allowing the Commission to contract for services of independent consultants. And so now we get into, at the middle of page 34, what is going to be required. And so these sections say that these sections all flow similarly. So this section now says, what does the Commission have to do to issue a solicitation for proposals? The Commission has to set a closing date for the solicitation 30 days after issuing the request for proposals. So again, fast tracking the opportunity for these proposals. The Commission will provide to the Power Plant Research Program a copy of each proposal. May not approve or develop a financial commitment for the cost of the construction or operations of these proposals. A dispatchable energy generation project or a large energy capacity resource project approved here may participate in other processes under which ratepayer funds are awarded. But as you will see later, there's some provisions here regarding ratepayer funding. 7-1207 on page 35. The Commission will include specifications in the solicitation that require each proposal to do the following. So these are specifications that have to be in the proposal. If the project's a natural gas energy generating station, it has to ensure that that project can be converted to use only hydrogen or a zero-emission biofuel as the energy source when the Commission determines that that conversion is feasible. The Commission shall include a detailed description, shall have them have a detailed description of the timeline for the construction of the project, including identifying the entity who owns the site, where are they in the queue for PGM approval, the ability to procure materials, any other information that demonstrates the applicant's ready to apply for a CPCN under this title as soon as reasonably feasible after receiving approval for the project, including the anticipated application date and ability to develop the project within the timeline presented. I'll stop there for a second because
Senator Galligan's got a question.
Senator, just before, this is the requirements that the Commission will have the applicant have to show to them in order to be in the queue for this fast-track procurement process.
Okay, I had a question about this in the hearing too, and I don't think the answer was that clear. When we're talking about having things that are convertible to either hydrogen or zero emission, it sounds like that's a really long way off. So what's that look like? So if you have natural gas and it has to be convertible, what is it? Can someone explain to me what that conversion will look like? Like, is there a certain way they build a plant and then they can do something later? I don't understand that. I'd love for somebody to tell me how this hydrogen stuff works and how it'll be converted.
So I think this is similar, Senator, to what happens at Eastern Corrections with regard to biofuels. So natural gas plants have to are all created, not necessarily equal, but all created with the ability to be able to dispatch other sources of gas. So this would require them to be able to at least demonstrate that they could be converted to gas. So hydrogen, the hydrogen fuel is some ways away, but could you as a developer show that I can be converted to an additional fuel if the state decides that the policy of natural gas changes at some point?
And then one other thing real quick, we kind of went over a little bit ago, some backtracking, but I'm looking on kind of our cheat sheet. It's where it started at page 31, but under the energy procurement. It talks about if the project is natural gas, the output may not exceed the capacity of coal and oil. How do you set that level of the capacity of coal and oil?
I'm getting there.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just was a little early with the question.
Okay, we'll go to Senator Hester before we let you go. Senator Hester?
I might have just had the same question. I was looking on page 31, lines 22 and 23, gas emissions profile, then coal or oil generating stations. Is that like less emissions per year over the operating period of the dispatchable energy generation?
I'm sorry, Senator.
Page 31, lines 22 and 23. What exactly is a lower greenhouse gas emissions profile?
So
Is that less emissions per year?
that's less emissions per year based on what that profile of that generation facility is.
Okay, great. And then on page 36,
I'm getting there, Senator. I haven't gotten there yet.
then I had, sorry, bouncing around. In the fast track that we just talked about, where are the lines that say exactly who gets to go through the fast track?
Yeah, I'll get you there.
Okay, great.
Okay. So if you will, I guess I went through that part at the bottom of page 35. So again, required in the proposal that comes to the commission, include a description of the location of the project, proximity of the site to existing transmission lines and right-of-way, whether the project would be retrofitting a previous generation station site. If applicable, do you have co-located energy generation? Do you have storage? Are you doing carbon capture or sequestration? Excuse me. Not necessary, it says, if applicable. And then the amount of hydrogen, if you already know, Senator Gallion, if you know that you can convert to hydrogen or zero emissions biofuels, then how much can you do? What do you think you can do, and whether it will mix with natural gas for energy generation? Then 1208, within 45 days after the closing date, the commission and the power plant research program shall recommend to the commission proposals to be authorized to utilize the expedited certificate of the CPCN. The power plant research program shall base its recommendations on all of the information in the proposal and the information specified in 1207. Unless the commission grants a request for good cause no later than 60 days after the close of solicitation, the commission must conditionally approve or deny a proposal. And in addition to the criteria specified in 1207, the commission will determine what other factors they need to do. So to start getting to those questions, sub D. The combined total capacity of dispatchable energy generation or large capacity energy resource projects approved under this section shall be greater than the combined summer peak capacity profile of coal and oil energy generating stations in the state, as outlined under Table 9 of Commission's 10-year plan, blah, blah. So the output of coal and oil generation stations in the state, so Brandon Shores, Wagner, other coal-fired power plants in the state or oil-fired power plants in the state, the combined total capacity of a project under this section shall be greater than the combined summer peak capacity of coal and oil. We're not going to approve a project, the PSC will say, if the capacity is less than what the PJM has authorized with Brandon Shores and continued operation. However, the combined total of capacity of natural gas dispatchable energy generation approved under this section may not exceed the summer peak capacity of oil and generation. So the other projects, say it's a nuclear project, for example, has to be greater than the summer peak capacity profile.
Hey, Senator Gallion?
Natural gas has to be equal.
So this, in a way, would be putting a cap on the amount of natural energy from natural gas and not on nuclear then, is?
In a sense, yes.
So, we have an energy crisis in the state. I don't know why we would be capping natural gas when that's the kind of the easiest way to produce electrons. And maybe, I guess that's going to be a discussion probably for voting session, but I don't know what the thought was of putting that cap on there in this. And you may not be able to speak.
No,
to that.
that is a policy decision that the General Assembly will have to make.
Okay, Senator Hester?
Can you tell us where Table 9 of the Commission's 10-year plan is?
My computer is frozen.
You can do it offline. Can you
And
just share it with us offline?
I will provide you with Table 9. That's,
Okay.
I keep forgetting that
And
you're
then I still
actually
have
not
my other
voting.
questions from before. Can we go back? So on page 36, line 13 and 14, we say carbon capture or sequestration. Is storage different than sequestration?
Yes. So carbon capture and sequestration is you take the carbon that's being produced out of a plant and then you're putting it in the ground. You're sequestering it in the ground. That's how carbon capture operates. It's different than just storing that carbon in some capacity. You're actually sequestering it by putting it into the ground.
So why would we want to narrow and not allow both? Carbon capture, storage, carbon capture or storage or sequestration?
So carbon capture is separate from sequestration in this sense. So carbon capture is what we've talked about. We're putting it someplace. We're providing it out into not into the ground, but we're capturing it in some other way. Sequestration is you're putting that carbon into the ground and you're sequestering it and you're keeping it there for a long duration. They're actually both, but if it was the committee's wisdom, you could put an or there and that would make sure that that is covered.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on this. I usually hear carbon capture and storage, so carbon capture or sequestration just seems like we're missing something.
It just misses the word storage.
But what about is there a difference in the technologies between capture, storage, and sequestration? If there's a difference in technology,
There is a difference in the technology.
Okay, so I don't know if we could figure out what the difference in technology is, and if we might want to just be slightly broader there.
Sure.
I don't know. So that, and then if you get back to us on the Table 9.
Yes. The answer is yes, I can do that.
Thanks.
Okay. I believe I am on page 37. Again, requirements for natural gas distribution in E. Every 5 years after the date that a natural gas dispatchable energy generation project or large capacity energy resource project becomes operational, the owner of the energy generation from natural gas shall submit to the commission a report regarding the feasibility of converting the natural gas dispatchable energy to hydrogen or biofuels. So again, Senator Gallion, that is saying that every 5 years, we want you to come back and tell us, is it feasible yet for you to go ahead and make that conversion? Important F, an approval or conditional approval of a project under this section does not guarantee that the project will be issued a CPCN under this title. It expedites but does not guarantee that it's going to get a CPCN. Page 38, Commission may approve up to 10 proposals to be eligible under this expedited process. Commission may approve more than 10 proposals if the Commission determines that the Commission itself has sufficient resources to complete that number of expedited reviews under the fast timeline required under the bill. The number of expedited reviews of the bill is in the public interest, so are we going to spend the time and the money to do this? Unless it's in the public interest, we're not going to. The Commission shall approve 4 non-emissions emitting projects to every 1 emissions emitting project. So what does that mean? That means that for every emitting project that you're approving, you're going to approve 4 other projects that don't emit energy, that don't emit greenhouse gases.
Okay, Senator Hester, did you have another question, or we'll move to Senator Watson?
Yeah, on 37 sub E, this every 5 years, you know, when I see those kinds of things is a company goes ahead and submits their report, and then tomorrow the technology is available and they get to burn unclean fuel for another 5 years before they have to do another report. Is there any capability for where the, I'm assuming it's PSC, but the entity requiring this report has the ability to request a report without having to wait 5 years should technology become available?
I'm going to double check this, Senator, but I believe that the Public Service Commission is going to have to report to you all on this program. So they will be able to have an opportunity to tell you that.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Almost done this section, if I can remember where I was. In determining the proposals to approve, the prioritization of dispatchable energy projects over large capacity energy resources. So anything that can be dispatched quickly would be the priority. In addition to that priority, the Commission shall base their approvals on which projects will provide the highest capacity value to the state, which projects are ready to begin construction, timeliness of a project to begin operation. When it's going to begin construction, is it going to begin operation timely? Which projects have the lowest emissions intensity? Still focused on making sure that if we can, we have low emission facilities on board. Commission then will determine whether the proceedings when the proceedings for a CPCN for this expedited process will start. And the Commission will obviously contract for independent consultants and experts in evaluating and comparing this. And a proposal that's not approved for this fast track, if you will, can still go through the normal CPCN process. And that's important to not lose. I think one of the senators mentioned to lose the opportunity to have that dispatchable generation. Okay. We're going then, skipping to page 49. Believe it or not, we're close to being done. Senator Hester?
Yes, Senator Hester? Yes, okay.
Bill and I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. So just bottom lining the fast track, who gets into the fast track? Is it these, I mean, if you had to summarize who gets in and who it applies to?
Sure. Anyone who, any entity that can generate what's it called? Emissions load capacity factor of 65% or greater. So if you're asking me what those entities are, it's nuclear, it's natural gas, and it's offshore wind. Those are the 3 that have capacity factors greater than 65%.
So natural gas of what size? Like, I mean, because we had this whole conversation last year about the CPCN process, how it's so darn slow. I think last year on Senate Bill 474, I suggested that we modify the CPCN so it worked for everybody. But that didn't happen. And so we exempted data centers and backup generation. So under this bill, if somebody has backup generation with natural gas, do they get the CPCN fast track?
They get an opportunity to fast track their CPCN. Excuse me.
That makes me nervous. So I guess the question is, if we're talking about 65%, do all generators, like, is it natural gas of a certain size that reaches that number? Or, I mean, I don't know what the factors are on these smaller backup generators, because we certainly don't want to be fast tracking them.
So it would be unlikely that a smaller backup generation would meet that capacity factor, that ELCC factor. It has to be of a certain size to be able to meet that. Yes, of course, Senator,
Thank you so much.
Of course. So on page 49, we talked earlier about dispatchable battery storage, energy storage. This section deals with transmission level energy storage. So big batteries, if you will. Commission shall regulate, by regulation or order, establish a competitive process for the procurement of projects for the construction of deployment of front-of-the-meter transmission energy storage devices in the state. By January 1, 2026, they're going to issue procurement solicitations. Those should be for a minimum of 800 megawatts of cumulative energy storage capacity by the nameplate capacity of that. What can that battery do? Okay, can it do 800 megawatts or more? That's what's going to be allowed here. Before October 1, 2026, the Commission will issue decisions on whether to approve one or more proposals and accept as provided, blah, blah, blah. The transmission energy storage devices procured in accordance with this section shall be operational within 24 months after a project is selected by the Commission. The Commission may extend the operating deadline. I'm on page 30 or before January 1, 2027. The Commission shall issue a second procurement solicitation for the procurement of projects for front-of-the-meter transmission and energy storage. So 2 solicitations for battery storage, for transmission-level battery storage. That second solicitation will be for 800 megawatts as well also. So you're talking 1,600 megawatts in 2 years of transmission-level energy storage.
Okay, Senator Caruso.
Chair, I just want to better understand. We spent a lot of time talking about distribution energy storage. Now we're talking about transmission energy storage. Can you give some examples?
So a transmission, so I gave an example of a distribution energy storage system, something that would be perhaps connected with an electric utility where that electric utility is storing, energy. Transmission level energy storage battery is something that's going to be connected to the transmission system of the state and is something that's going to be able to capture electrons coming from that system, thereby potentially avoiding needing for additional transmission lines. So bigger batteries, Senator, bigger batteries.
Same type, I mean, you have the process with that, but then are we talking about the same entities that would be providing the transmission?
I believe for the most part, but let me get through that section and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. Talks about the procurement, again, 800 additional megawatts, the decision to approve. Energy storage has to be the second solicitation within 24 months. Here is the requirements for the storage, for the solicitation. Pricing schedule for the transmission energy storage project, that's at least for 15 years. Think about it as equates to nuclear, that's going to be around for a while. represents the anticipated wholesale value or capacity or any other benefits in a cost-benefit analysis. So in this section, we start building out the cost-benefit analysis beginning on page 51 on a dollar per megawatt hour basis, including locational value and time to deploy the energy storage devices, the value of long-duration storage, including capacity accreditation value, so as measured in PJM's ELCC ratings at 65% or greater, avoided or delayed transmission, generation, and distribution costs, and avoided emissions in the short term, the value of rapid deployment of energy storage devices, reliability during periods of electricity system stress. So this is important that the batteries are designed so that when those summer hot peak days is additional dispatchable generation on a larger basis than just a dispatchable battery from a utility throughout the system, throughout the Maryland system. And then any other avoided costs. Oh, I skipped one. The value of reliability and the ability to deliver capacity during extreme weather, fuel scarcity, and large unplaced resource outages. So for example, senators, had Texas had a slew of these transmission devices, it would not have experienced what Texas experienced when it had its cold period, because it would have had additional transmission level generation that could have been dispatched to avoid their crisis that they had then. So this, again, requires, bottom of 51, a community benefit agreement, contractors and workers, subcontractors, business and competitive bidding process, everything similar to what we required in distribution, what we required in nuclear, and what we required in dispatchable. The energy storage device shall be capable of delivering its nameplate capacity. If it will have the capacity and connection rights with PJM interconnection, so it's got to connect to PJM, and will have surplus interconnection service. So the idea is whatever it builds into PJM, it's going to have extra surplus associated with it, so that all of those electrons aren't being just dispatched through PJM. We're going to have those electrons available here in Maryland for what we might need in the case of any kind of issues with demand. The ability of energy storage device to deliver nameplate capacity will be limited only by a non-energy storage generation resource, which it has to share a point of interconnection with in the transmission system. So if there's something that's drawing additional power there, that doesn't affect the limit, that doesn't affect the battery storage requirement for the build out here. What it says is, okay, you're allowed to have a little less capacity if you've got something that's connected to you that's not a battery storage device. And it allows the front-of-the-meter transmission energy storage devices to be paired with renewables, and that can be included in this proposal. So what does the commission have to do? Bottom of page 52. In selecting a proposal, the commission shall specify a 15-year pricing schedule that uses a monthly fixed price for each megawatt that represents the wholesale value capacity. This is trying to limit the cost associated with front-of-the-meter transmission. That each electricity supplier shall be responsible for purchasing storage capacity credits for monthly fixed price proportional to the electricity supplier's capacity obligation. So the supplier is going to have to purchase credits from the storage device because they're going to be getting the benefits of the increased transmission level storage. PJM capacity market revenue that is earned by the storage project goes back to the commission, that gets refunded to each distribution customer proportional to the electricity supplier's monthly capacity obligation. So a refund to the ratepayers if for revenue earned by the fact that PJM gets the benefit of having our storage devices help them with their reliability concerns. But the energy cost and ancillary services revenue earned, the storage project keeps that. Electric companies will jointly select an escrow administrator to make sure that that money is captured in an appropriate way. We'll specify that For continued receipt of payment, the applicant will demonstrate to the commission that the devices are available. They incorporate penalties for non-performance and underperformance in the contract, including withholding payment. May terminate energy storage devices from the program if device performance does not improve, and will consider other non-price factors to ensure that project deliverability within 2 years after the award date, such as what's the maturity date, where are they in the interconnection queue status, site control. These are all requirements to make sure that the energy storage device is going to be quickly put onto our grid within the 2-year period. So I'm trying to skip through some a little bit. So again, safety plans on page 54, non-price factors, those are all non-price. Is it safety? Is it reliable? Are we going to have opportunities to have it? Is it, is it going to be developed? All energy storage devices that utilize lithium-ion batteries comply with the most up-to-date revisions in the National Fire Protection Association's 855 standard. So that's the standard that is now required across the country for batteries that are used for energy storage with lithium-ion. And we'll obviously have, again, a proposed decommissioning plan, recycling and reuse plan. The commission then has to, once it gives public notice, hold one or more public hearings, issue one or more orders to select a proposal. The commission may end the solicitation process without selecting a proposal if nobody meets the requirements of the section. And then for any project selection under this, the commission may adopt additional conditions for the construction and operation of facilities included in the proposal. So this leaves the commission, gives the commission some latitude to impose additional conditions on these large level transmissions, energy storage devices. And an order here bestows the same rights to whoever wins that a generation station would be granted under the CPCN process. Any transmission energy storage device built in the subtitle shall count toward the deployment goals under the earlier section. So if you build this, this counts for the amount of battery storage that we have. And then the commission reports to us on the effectiveness of the program. Okay. So we are on page 56. So what page 56 says is that because we are fast-tracking these processes, we need to fast-track some of the agency's operations with regard to the process to make sure that there aren't delays in that process. So it's the intent of the General Assembly to recognize the need of the state energy agencies to be responsive to the requests and legislative directives of the General Assembly, and reduce the time it takes for state agencies to procure consultants to assist with legislative mandates that have deadlines specified in law, as these do in this bill. To be timely in addressing climate change, environmental energy, and greenhouse gas emission-related issues. So this section only applies to the procurement of consultants that are legislatively mandated with specific timeframes issued in law, and will address issues related only to climate change, the environment, energy, and greenhouse gas emissions. So the following units are authorized to issue competitive sealed bids higher than their designated small procurement authorities: the PSC, the Public Service Commission, the Office of People's Counsel, the Maryland Energy Administration, the Department of the Environment, and the Department of Natural Resources. But before awarding a procurement contract under this section, the agency head and the Chief Procurement Officer has to approve these projects. The Chief Procurement Officer shall approve a procurement contract if it complies with this section, the requirements of this section, and if they do not approve submitted under section, the contract shall, if they don't approve within 5 days after receiving the contract, they have to, it is considered approved.
Okay, Senator Hester?
So is this like the only kind of large project that would not go before the BPW?
I don't think any CPCN project would necessarily go before the BPW.
Okay.
Okay, home stretch, I promise. So beginning on page 58 really is the language, 57, 58? 58 is the actual language. To the bottom of 58. Subject to subparagraphs of this section, compliance fees, the ACP fees paid to use to provide grants to electric companies to be credited to each residential distribution customer. So what this is it says that any of the funds from the ACP program will be credited, subject to the law. Funds from the ACP will go back to ratepayers. So the refunding of credited amounts to the residential distribution customers shall be identified on the customer's bill as a line item identified as a legislative energy hardship credit. Electric company awarded a grant under this paragraph. So the PSC would say, okay, we've got ACP dollars here. We're going to authorize the utilities to put on the bills of residential customers a legislative hardship credit. The electric company can't retain any of the funds to cover any expenses and should provide all of the grant funds out the door to the residential distribution customers. So, and the process to do this will be directed and overseen by the commission. Any questions?
Okay, Senator Brooks on the, what we are calling the legislative hardship credit.
Yeah. So
Rebate.
Okay, that credit, so that's gonna go back to all ratepayers?
All residential ratepayers.
All residential ratepayers, okay. All right, thanks, Chair.
Senator Hester and then Vice Chair Kagan.
Does it literally say legislative hardship?
It will literally say legislative hardship
I
credit.
think we should work on the wording of that. It does not sound good.
Senator, I did not write those words.
Okay, well, that, you know, that's why we're putting all the issues out here. Okay, Vice Chair Kagan.
Complicated, long, intensive bill that a ton of smart people have been working on. I hate this portion. Not only just the words of it, I hate that someone who lives in a huge mansion is going to somehow be getting a hardship payment when they're not going to need it, notice it, or appreciate it. And someone who lives in a huge mansion who never turns off their lights and uses the most energy inefficient appliances and stuff gets more money than someone who lives in, you know, a teeny tiny little apartment and does the best they can and is pinching pennies. I hate the concept of that. I don't like it as everyone getting the same amount either. I don't, but this is, I really hate this part of the bill. And it may be that that's irrelevant, but I did need to say that for public consumption. I think this is an ineffective way for us to spend tight dollars during these challenging times. Don't like it.
Thank you, Senator. I did not write this part of the bill.
Okay. Okay, Senator Washington.
I wanted to make sure, is this the, maybe I missed it, the CEF part, the 200 million? Okay, so that's the, okay, so this is the part where we're trying to deal with the, now, we could certainly, there could be an income adjustment to it, et cetera. But this is the idea, like, that a lot of the things in this bill won't really take effect for a while. We're probably planning in a way that maybe we should have done 10 years ago or 15 years ago. But this 200 million would go right into some pockets of Marylanders, like, right away. Is that the idea or no?
So that there is not a number attached to
Or
it,
when I'm saying
but
some number.
that is exactly the idea.
Some number.
That is exactly the
It could be 100,
idea.
it could be $10.
So this is looked at as a understanding that particularly the residential customers of the state of Maryland have had some difficult times with regard to the rising energy costs, and understanding that there's a source of revenue associated with energy that is the ACP pieces, that this would go back to those residential customers.
And again, the concept is that the legislature is acting, this body is acting right now to address hardships that are being currently experienced.
Correct.
Now, we could perhaps get recommendations or debate where it comes from or how, but the intent of this portion is to provide relief to those Marylanders who need it.
Correct.
And in light of unregulated increases or underregulated increases in electric and gas, energy bills. Is that the? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Caruso.
Just to follow up on Senator Washington's point, our constituents expect some type of immediate relief. This legislation, which has been very thoughtfully put together and is talking about really addressing what we need to do for our in-state generation. But we know even with all of these expedited processes in place, when we went through that bill line by line, it's still quite a detailed process that any applicant would have to meet, which means it's still going to take a certain amount of time. The opportunity to provide some immediate relief for ratepayers, and as I understand it, this is the money ratepayers already paid in. So if this is the money that ratepayers already paid in, this is their money. And, and I have to tell you, from my constituents, it's been at every level as far as who's been hit with these high bills. So, I agree that might need some working on terminology, but I welcome the fact that we would have a bipartisan piece of legislation that would provide immediate relief to taxpayers.
Devin, back to you.
So we are on page 60. So what page 60 does is it removes waste to energy and refuse-derived fuel from the renewable portfolio standard. It's simply what it does there. And we will talk a little bit more about it in a second. On page 61, that legislative energy hardship credit again. This language says that hardship credit is non-taxable. So no taxes can be taken from that credit.
There was some ambiguity about that, so we're making it clear.
So on page 62, this relates back to that expedited PSC process, and what it says here is that if necessary, the Public Service Commission may bump the expedited CPCN process for the components of this bill above other matters, but it doesn't affect the place in line for those other matters within the Public Service Commission's purview. So if it does bump somebody up, and it delays them for a month or two, that doesn't negatively impact that entity's ability to go through the CPCN process. Okay, we talked about that. Expediting the provisions. Okay, we are down to now the uncodified language on beginning on page 65. So Section 7 doesn't affect a presently existing contractual right. Section 4 of the Act says that this relates back to the waste to energy prohibition, that it applies to the RPS compliance years beginning this year, but also it delays the effect for a municipally owned waste to energy facility. Section 9 says that the PSC will report on the establishment of zero-emission credits, which we talked about in the nuclear energy section, and whether any other additional legislative action is needed for zero-emission credits. Section 10 says that the General Assembly supports the extension of renewal of the FERC license for Calvert Cliffs. Section 11 requires a report from the Department of Human Services. So the Office of Evaluation of the Office of Home Energy Programs was evaluated by the Office of Program Evaluation and Government Accountabilities, and what it found that the energy programs that help residential ratepayers are all over the map within the department. And so what this says is, the report says consolidate them. Can you give us your recommendations as to consolidate all of the home energy programs into one for cost savings? So this section 12 deals with the legislative hardship credit and how it would be distributed. So it will be distributed, this tells the governor to distribute it by budget amendment, would make sure that it's done during the 2026 fiscal year, so the fiscal year coming up in July. Half the amount would be given in the peak winter months, and half the amount would be given in the summer months. And the Section 13 deals with the fact that we are non-taxing the legislative hardship credit. And Section 14 says that we are expediting the CPCN, the effective date of the whole bill, June 1, 2025, but the expedited process for the CPCN, the expedited, terminates after 5 years. The presumption is if we don't have someone that by then, we're in big trouble. And that completes my presentation.
A lot. Senator Hester, question?
Sorry. Yeah, it was really amazing, Devin. I did just get table 9, so you don't have to send that to me.
Thank you.
But I do have now a question. Can you just say in like plain English? So the answer is, like, table 9 says that it's greater than the combined summer peak capacity of coal and oil generating stations in the state. So that's like 3,000 megawatts. So what's great? And then point 2 on page 37 says not to exceed. So D1 and D2, now that I know it's 3,000 megawatts, what does D1 and D2 mean on page 37?
Page 37. So if you've got 3,000 megawatts, what that says is anything approved this session under this section has to be greater than 3,000 megawatts.
The combined total capacity approved. So it means we must fast track more than 3,000 megawatts.
Correct.
And then what does number 2 say?
So in the number 2 says that it's specific for natural gas. So it says that natural gas can exceed that 3,000 megawatts.
Natural gas may not exceed.
Correct. So you can build 15 gigs of nuclear, but you can only build 3 of natural gas.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, any final questions before we, yes, Senator Watson.
Hey, Devin, is it safe to say that anybody that wants to build the capacity for natural gas will understand that it's only temporary and that the intent of this body is to move us off natural gas to something cleaner, right?
So that's a policy question that you're asking me. However, I will try to answer it a bit. If I am building a natural gas plant in Maryland, I'm going to assume that I'm going to be producing energy for a while. I may have to look at conversions and down the road, but my opinion is that we will need the energy generation that we can get from the provisions of this bill for longer than 5 years.
Got it. So I'm just pulling back at that every 5 years report. It seems to me if somebody's going to build a gas generation, when they submit that, they should also have the plan to revert it or convert it to be able to handle these other potential types so that the plans are already there. In other words, these plans aren't going to be substantially changing year after year after year. I mean, these are big hulking things that have a way to do things. So if we're going to build it, why can't the PSC, they submit to the PSC, when they submit the original plans, what is the plan to convert? So when the time comes and there is an August body that says, hey, this technology is readily available, we can turn the switch a lot quicker than waiting 3 years or 5 years after the last time they submitted a report. That's what I'm trying to get at, because everything you've said since I asked that question has been about fast tracking and moving fast and doing things quick. It just seems to me that that's like a no-brainer almost.
So I think that the way that it's set up in here for that provision is that the Public Service Commission is going to definitely look more favorably on one of those projects that has that ability to do the conversion. However, the Public Service Commission does not need to approve, does not need that piece to approve a natural gas plant developed in Maryland. It would make it, I guess, more beneficial for them to have it, number one. And number two, Senator, if I own a natural gas plant and I see that the value, the greater value is going to be for me to do a conversion, I'm going to do that conversion.
I just don't want us to get to a point where somebody comes in and says, we're going to provide you natural gas, and then we're ready to turn a switch and all of that equipment is now obsolete. They can't do anything with it. So it's a Brandon Shores, right? When we got to hold on to it and try to figure it out. Just something to think about.
Yep.
I mean, maybe that's not required as it's not a huge amendment or anything, but, you know, I'm just thinking the natural implications. If I'm reading this, I'm going to assume that even though I may pass away, the oil business that I'm setting up is temporary, and there is a thrust by this state to move us someplace else. I'm just filling a void, and that's what we've always talked about. All right.
Okay, I think that's a lot there for everybody to take their homework and percolate. Guys, so it looks like the House might be reaching the end of their work. Okay, I hate to do this, but they're still on the floor. We don't want to be outdone by them, and so let's take a 10-minute break, but I want to come back here because we have to do a pivot to another super simple matter called the blueprint. And so, and then we still have 2 House hearings. The 2 delegates are going to be rolling over here too. I'm sorry, we're in that mode here, man. What's that? Yeah, quarter of, 4:45. 15 minutes. Yeah, and come back here. Yep.